I've been telling people I'm okay. But lately, okay feels more like camouflage than truth. Saturday morning used to mean freedom. Sleeping in, pancakes, a lazy stretch with sunlight spilling across the room. Now it just means another 12 hours of scrolling. Another day where I forget what it feels like to belong in my own skin. The blinds stay half closed, not to block out the world, but to keep it from noticing me. A phone screen inches from my face becomes the only window I open. There's a mug of coffee on my nightstand, still half full, still cold. This is the third time this week I've let it sit there untouched, forgotten while I chase other people's noise. I brewed it with intention. I told myself I'd slow down, sip it while reading something real, maybe even step outside. But the moment the phone lit up, I was gone again. Drowned in a loop of TikToks, story replies, half laughs that don't reach my chest. By the time I surface, the coffee's dead, and so am I, in some quiet way. I used to think this was rest, lying in bed, blankets pulled high, letting hours slip past without demand. But it's not rest, it's erasure. Stillness that doesn't soothe, only numbs. Every weekend I call this recovery, but really I'm just rehearsing disappearance. I caught my reflection last night in the black glass after my phone died. My face looked older, not from years, but from exhaustion. Tired eyes, tight jaw, shadows that didn't exist when I was 20. I laughed at myself, the way people do when they're uncomfortable. Even thought about captioning it as a joke. Main character vibes, but in the tragedy genre. But the laugh cracked halfway through. And suddenly, it wasn't funny. It was frightening. Because here's the part I never say out loud. I don't know when I stopped recognizing myself. I scroll through videos of people hiking, couples stargazing, kids skating down sidewalks, and for a moment, I feel like I'm there too. But then the video ends, and I'm still here, still in this bed, still shrinking. It shouldn't be possible to feel this tired from doing nothing. But it is. The silence of weekends has become louder than any weekday rush. I tell myself, at least I'm saving money by not going out. At least I'm not overworking like the hustle culture kids. At least I'm safe here, wrapped in my own space. But I know I'm lying. These aren't victories. They're excuses. A way to convince myself that absence is the same as peace. It isn't. Peace has weight, warmth, a pulse. This is static. Like a broken radio humming in the corner of my life. White noise swallowing me whole. Sometimes I don't even want to get better. Healing sounds exhausting. The world outside feels expensive, loud, too much. It's easier to melt into the mattress, to let other people's lives stream past while mine waits on pause. Easier to pretend I chose this. But in the quiet, I can feel the truth pressing against me. I've started confusing hiding with healing. And I don't know how to tell the difference anymore. Tonight the blinds are still half closed. The coffee's still cold. My phone is still buzzing with lives I don't touch. I've spent another day doing nothing, and somehow lost even more of myself in the process. Maybe weekends aren't meant to save me. Maybe they're meant to remind me I'm still worth saving. And if this is what I've begun to call rest, then what exactly am I recovering from? I thought lying still would heal me, but instead, I was vanishing. The strange part is, no one really notices when you start to fade. You still post your memes, still answer I'm good. When someone asks, still show up at work on Monday. But the truth is quieter than that. It shows up in the way you microwave dinner and eat it standing in the kitchen, lights off. It shows up in the way you scroll past someone's story without reacting. Not because you don't care, but because you've forgotten how to. I used to write poems in my notes app. Not for anyone, just for me, tiny lines about the sky, the way streetlights hum, how coffee tasted sweeter on days I felt seen. Now the notes app is empty, blank. I open it sometimes out of habit, but nothing comes. Just silence where words used to be. When did I stop recognizing the person brushing their teeth in the mirror? That version of me who danced barefoot in the kitchen, who stayed up too late reading, who believed weekends meant possibility. Where did they go? Maybe the worst heartbreak isn't losing someone else. Maybe it's losing yourself quietly without even realizing it's happened. Here's how it creeps in. 1. The endless scroll. You tell yourself you'll watch one video, maybe two. But suddenly it's 3 a.m., and you've memorized strangers' faces while forgetting your own. It feels harmless, but each swipe chips away at your sense of time, your sense of self. 2. The ignored hunger. You skip meals because you don't feel like cooking, but really you don't feel like caring. You eat chips at midnight not because you're hungry, but because chewing feels like proof you still exist. 3. The muted sunlight. Curtains stay closed, not out of laziness, but out of fear. Fear that daylight will remind you of everything you're not doing, everything you've put off, everything slipping through your fingers. Each of these looks ordinary. Each of these could pass as nothing. But together they build a silence so heavy it bends the soul. Sometimes I joke about it to make it sound lighter. Weekend depression arc. I'll text a friend with a laughing emoji, hoping the humor will soften the truth. But deep down I know it's not funny. It's me quietly quitting my own life, frame by frame. I saw a viral phrase the other day, ghosted and haunted. That's exactly what it feels like. I ghost the world by staying inside, pretending I don't care. But at night, the ghost of who I used to be haunts me, the me that still believed in mornings, in plans, in showing up for life. There's one moment that stays with me. Last weekend I typed out a message to someone I miss. It wasn't even long, just, "Hey, do you want to grab coffee?" But before I hit send, I backspaced the whole thing. I convinced myself they'd be too busy, or worse, they'd say no. And so I erased not just the message, but the chance. I stared at the empty screen for a long time, wondering how many moments like this I've deleted, how many tiny bridges I've burned before they even had the chance to hold me. If I keep folding myself smaller and smaller, what's left at the end? That's the thing about quiet pain. It doesn't scream. It drips, slowly, relentlessly, like a faucet no one bothers to fix, filling the sink one drop at a time until suddenly it's overflowing. I used to think I was just tired, that I needed one more nap, one more weekend off, one more Netflix binge to reset. But the truth is harsher. I've been bleeding energy into silence, and the silence has been winning. Tonight, I sat in the dark and whispered something I didn't mean to admit. I'm scared that if I keep living like this, I'll forget what it feels like to live at all. The words hung in the air, too heavy to pull back. And maybe that's the most dangerous kind of loneliness. Not when no one's there to hear you, but when you start talking to yourself and you're the only one answering. There's a message I never sent. It still sits there, 3 words that could have been a bridge. But instead, they're just dots that lead nowhere. Last Sunday, I typed out, "Do you want?" and froze. I couldn't even finish the sentence. My chest tightened with 1,000 possible rejections, and I hit delete. It was gone before it ever lived. I sat there staring at a blank screen, wondering how many times I've done this erased a moment before it had the chance to breathe. It shouldn't matter. It was just a text. Just pixels. But the silence that followed was heavier than any no could have been. That silence sounded like my life lately. Not ruined, not loud, just erased. That night I walked into the kitchen and turned on the light, only to turn it off again a second later. It felt wrong, too sharp, too alive for the way I'd been living. I ended up standing in the dark, microwave humming as a frozen meal spun inside. That was dinner. That was life. And in that moment, I heard it, the thought I'd been avoiding for months. If I keep living like this, who will I become? It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It felt like a hairline crack splitting quietly through glass, not dramatic, but irreversible. Sometimes collapse doesn't look like breaking. It looks like absence, like canceling plans until people stop inviting you, like laughing at jokes you don't feel, like answering good when someone asks how you are and forgetting you lied 5 seconds later. I used to believe loneliness was silence, but now I think it's this: being surrounded by noise, surrounded by people, and still feeling invisible. I thought I was resting, but I wasn't resting. I was dissolving. And then something strange happened. On Monday, I drove past a forest I'd ignored 100 times. Just a patch of trees by the side of the road. Nothing special. But that morning, I stopped. I don't know why. Maybe because the silence inside me had become unbearable, and I needed a silence that wasn't mine. I poured coffee from a thermos, steam rising into the cold air, and stood there staring at trees swaying like they knew something I didn't. The world didn't feel fixed. My chest was still heavy. But for the first time in weeks, I wasn't dissolving. I was present. That's when I realized rest isn't absence, it's presence. In my pocket, I carried an old compass keychain someone once gave me as a joke. I never thought about it much. But standing there, coffee warm in my hands, I pulled it out and held it. The needle twitched, steadying toward north. And I thought, maybe this isn't about where I'm going. Maybe it's about remembering I still have direction at all. The compass didn't point me to a city, or a plan, or a future. It pointed me back to myself. I want to say that changed everything. That the trees gave me answers, that the compass whispered a map. But healing doesn't announce itself. It seeps in, drop by drop. All I knew in that moment was this. If peace can live here, in a roadside forest I never cared about, then maybe I've been running from something that's been waiting for me all along. I stood there longer than I meant to, watched the sky shift colors, watched birds dart between branches, watched my breath fog into the air and fade. Nothing miraculous happened, no grand epiphany, just stillness. And for once, the stillness didn't feel like erasure, it felt like being found. When I got back into the car, I whispered to myself, almost like a prayer, if peace is this close, why have I been running from it? The compass rested on the passenger seat. The thermos was empty. The silence, for once, wasn't heavy. It was alive. It turns out I didn't need a passport to find myself. I didn't need a 5-star retreat or even a long weekend away. All I needed was the courage to step outside my front door with a little bit of intention. That's the part no one tells you about healing. Sometimes it starts embarrassingly small. A 5-minute walk around the block, sitting on the steps outside your apartment with a mug of tea, staring at the sky like you're waiting for an answer that never comes, but still asking anyway. I used to think adventure meant danger, thrill, something worth posting about. But maybe the real adventure is the part no one sees. The quiet walk, the still moment, the way your body finally exhales when you give it a chance. So I started experimenting with what I call micro-adventures. Not escapes, not trips. Just small ways of remembering I'm alive. 1. Forest walks at dawn. The first time I tried it, the air was still cold enough to sting, and the trees looked like they were whispering secrets I'd forgotten to hear. I realized I wasn't behind. I was exactly where I needed to be, breath matching the wind, footsteps keeping time with silence. 2. Stargazing picnics. One evening, I carried nothing but fruit, water, and an old blanket up a hill near my place. It felt silly at first, like I was playing pretend. But when the stars came out, I understood. It wasn't about the food, it was about wonder. About remembering that there are lights above me that have burned for thousands of years, and they didn't need me to perform. They just needed me to notice. 3. Coffee by the river. I used to drink coffee just to wake up. Now I drink it slowly by the water, watching ripples catch the light. The river doesn't hurry, and somehow, sitting there, I learned not to hurry either. 4. Library corners. I thought libraries were boring when I was younger. Now I think they might be sacred. There's a silence there that doesn't feel empty, it feels clean. Like the inside of my mind after too many tabs are finally closed. 5. Rooftop sunsets. My apartment building isn't fancy, the rooftop isn't beautiful. But every evening, when the sky shifts into gold and violet, the world feels infinite. Sometimes I sit there alone with music. Sometimes I sit there with nothing. Either way, the sky never fails to remind me. Endings can be beautiful too. Each of these moments was so small, I almost dismissed them. But strung together, they began to stitch me back. At first, I called them experiments. Then, I realized they were lifelines. Little anchors tying me to the present moment, keeping me from floating away into static. I remember joking with a friend. Guess I'm in my healing era now, CEO of drinking coffee slowly. We laughed. But later, when I was alone, I realized it wasn't a joke. I really was in my healing era. And maybe that was enough. Here's what surprised me most. The world didn't change. My problems didn't vanish. The bills still came. The loneliness still knocked sometimes. The feed was still endless. But when I gave myself permission to step into these micro-adventures, the weight shifted. Because the truth is, I didn't need the world to pause for me. I just needed a pause for myself. The compass sits in my pocket now whenever I go. Not because I need directions, but because I need the reminder. I can choose where I stand. I can choose to be here, not drifting in someone else's noise. The compass doesn't tell me where to go. It tells me not to forget I have a center. I still drink coffee that goes cold sometimes. I still scroll longer than I want to admit. I still cancel plans occasionally. But now, I also step into the forest. I also climb the rooftop. I also pack fruit and watch the stars. And every time I do, I come back with one quiet truth. Healing doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers through leaves, through rivers, through sunsets. Sometimes it's not about running away, but about remembering you never had to. So tonight, I'll turn off my phone. I'll carry my blanket outside. And I'll let the sky remind me what peace feels like. Not an escape, not an achievement, just a return. I used to tell myself this was harmless. Just another lazy weekend. Just another day where I gave myself permission to do nothing. Everyone does it, right? Everyone jokes about bed rotting online, about soft quitting life for a while. It's supposed to be funny, relatable, normal. But the truth is, every time I call this rest, I feel something in me slip further away. Not calmer, not healed, just smaller. Like I'm folding myself down week after week until one day there will be nothing left to unfold. And here's the question I keep avoiding, the one that hits harder than any notification ever could. If I keep numbing myself like this, what will I lose that no one can give back? At first, I thought the answer was simple. Time. Lost hours, wasted days. But time is only the surface. What I'm really losing is aliveness. The laughter that doesn't need rehearsing. The mornings that taste like warm coffee instead of bitter regret. The version of me that believed in possibility, not paralysis. I thought burnout was the enemy, that overwork would be what destroyed me. But now I see a quieter, sharper danger, disappearing into my own silence. Quiet quitting, not my job, but my existence. I picture my younger self, sometimes the one who stayed up late writing terrible poems about the moon, who ran barefoot just because the night air felt like freedom, who believed Saturday meant adventure. If they saw me now, lying in the dark, face lit by a screen, what would they say? Maybe they'd be angry. Maybe they'd be heartbroken. Or maybe they'd just whisper the one sentence I can't forgive. You promised you wouldn't become this tired. So why did you let yourself? The irony is I've been ghosting my own soul, pretending it doesn't need me. Muting its calls the way I mute group chats I don't want to answer. But the haunting always comes back. A viral phrase called it ghosted and haunted. That's exactly it. I ghost myself all week, and every night the ghost of who I used to be comes knocking. And the cost? It doesn't scream, it doesn't even cry. It just piles up like dust in corners you never clean, like tabs you never close. One day, you finally look around, and the whole room, the whole life feels unlivable. Sometimes I try to laugh about it, make it sound lighter. Guess I'm in my villain era, I'll text adding a half smile emoji. Like choosing to vanish is some edgy rebellion. But the truth, I'm not a villain, I'm not even a hero. I'm just absent, missing from my own story. And here's the thing about absence. If you let it last too long, it doesn't just pause your life, it erases it. I keep circling the same question. What's at stake if I don't change? And the answer terrifies me. Not because I'll miss out on success, not because I'll fall behind my peers, but because life will keep going with or without me. My friends will keep meeting up. The seasons will keep shifting. The river will keep flowing, whether I sit beside it or not. The scariest part isn't being left behind by the world. It's being left behind by myself. Last weekend, I almost stayed in bed again. The blinds were closed. The coffee was already cooling. The weight of not today pressed heavy on me. But then I remembered the compass. I remembered the forest. I remembered that even the smallest adventure could save me from erasure, and I forced myself to go. Not because I felt inspired, but because I was terrified of what would happen if I didn't. Because here's the truth I can't shake. If I keep living like this, will I ever remember how to feel alive? That question doesn't resolve. It lingers, heavy. But maybe that's the point. Healing doesn't always arrive with a bow. Sometimes it arrives as a warning, a whisper, a question you can't stop carrying. And maybe the real danger isn't pain. Maybe it's forgetting that joy ever belonged to you in the first place. The compass never pointed me outward. It pointed me inward toward the home I kept abandoning. For weeks I carried it like a small secret, heavy enough to remind me, light enough to ignore when I wanted to. Some days I touched it absent-mindedly in my pocket, the way people fidget with keys. But each time I felt steadier, as if it was whispering, "You're still here, you're not lost." I used to think the opposite of being lost was being found. Now I think it's simpler. The opposite of being lost is being present. And presence, I'm realizing, can be as small as noticing the way coffee steam curls into morning air. Last night, I went back to the rooftop. The same cracked concrete, the same broken chair, the same skyline I've looked at 1,000 times, but never really seen. This time I brought nothing with me, not even my phone. Just the compass and myself. At first, I panicked. My hands twitched, searching for distraction. My brain reached for a playlist, for a scroll, for proof of existence. But there was nothing. Just me, the sky, and silence. And strangely, that silence didn't erase me. It held me. I remembered all the weekends I'd spent dissolving into static. How many hours I lost to numbing, convincing myself this was rest. How many mornings I let slip by without looking at the sky. How many times I ghosted myself pretending I didn't need presence, only escape. But standing there, watching the sun bleed into the horizon, I realized something I'd never let myself say out loud. Peace was never far. It was always right here, waiting for me to show up. The compass didn't have to spin to tell me that. The rooftop, the sky, even the chipped concrete under me, they all said the same thing. You belong here, even if you're still healing. It's strange how healing sneaks up. I thought it would be fireworks, a grand moment, some cinematic shift where I finally felt whole. Instead, it was this: a rooftop sunset, a pocket compass, breath in cold air. Ordinary things carrying extraordinary weight. And maybe that's the lesson I almost missed. Healing isn't about spectacle. It's about surrender, about laying down the performance and letting yourself be seen, even if only by the sky. I used to laugh and say, I'm in my healing era, like it was an aesthetic, a phase. But I see it differently now. It's not an era, it's a choice. Every morning, every weekend, every single breath, I choose whether to disappear or arrive. And I'm tired of disappearing. I think about that phrase again, ghosted and haunted. For so long, I ghosted my own life, and every night I was haunted by the echo. But maybe the haunting was a gift, a reminder that I still had a soul worth returning to. So tonight, I let the compass rest. I don't need it to tell me where to go anymore, because the point isn't direction, it's permission. Permission to stand still, permission to notice, permission to live without rushing towards something else. The woods, the river, the rooftop. None of them are escapes, they're returns. I don't know if I'll ever be completely healed. Maybe healing isn't a finish line. Maybe it's a rhythm, a breath, a candle you keep relighting, even when the wax runs low. Tonight, the candle is still lit. That's enough. So here's my offering, not a conclusion, not a cure. Just this. One step into the woods. One sip by the river. One look at the stars. One rooftop sunset. That's all it takes to remember. You don't need to cross oceans to come home. Sometimes, the home you were searching for was the silence you kept avoiding. And for the first time in a long time, the silence doesn't erase me. It keeps me.